All right, everybody, thank you for joining me. It is Sunday, History in the Making. We are on TikTok and all the other outlets. I believe everything is working so far. I have a plethora of computers all tied together, so I'm going to do the best job I can for you here. We'll see if our router and internet connection can hold up with all the talking I've got going back and forth of all this. But a very important update to bring you. We've had a second landfall now in Louisiana from Ida. Winds are still at 145 miles per hour. That's down just a little bit from 150. We had another landfall about an hour ago. But it's very marshy here. There's a lot of wiggles in the coast, and so the official center is kind of moving back over water, then it moves back over land. An important consideration, too, to take into account is that there's just a lot of swamp area here too. So there's a lot of what we call potential for a land cane set up because there's so much water that the hurricane, even though it's over technically not in the Gulf, it's still very little friction because of the layout and the geography of Louisiana. So southern Louisiana is very marshy. It's where, you've got the Mississippi River going down through there. New Orleans is under sea level. And all of that kind of combines for a very slow weakening with this. Everything pretty much came together the way we were expecting it. And unfortunately, it didn't really yesterday. We didn't really have a good storm, but now we still had a strong hurricane, but now we have seen things go downhill just as the storm is nearing the Houma area there near Grand Isle on the just got the east side of the old Eyewall. The newer Eyewall there in the center is still intact as well. So we didn't have time to weaken this thing once it started to ramp up. We didn't have any time to really see anything to weaken it. The Gulf of Mexico had very warm water in it. We were watching this for the past couple of days, and as it moved over western Cuba over the weekend, it kind of disrupted the circulation a little bit, but then it really got its act together last night. In fact, last night we only had about 105 mile per hour sustained winds. Of course, this morning it went up to 150. I believe it dropped about 48 millibars in pressure overnight in less than 24 hours. So if you remember the term bomb cyclone, when we see that bomb out sometimes, you see these storms bomb out, the extratropical storms in the winter, those are giving you your big nor'easters and your big blizzards. This did twice that. And I don't know if in the history of weather we've ever seen a storm strengthen this much just prior to landfall. It brings back memories of Michael a few years ago, the way Michael got its peak intensity right at landfall. And of course, with the changing climate, you have an enormous amount of heat capacity, very high octane fuel in the Gulf of Mexico that got this storm up in intensity. What you're looking at right now is kind of a 3D look at the radar. And for our TikTok viewers, still, you want to follow your local meteorologist. I'm based in Virginia, but I'm going to be doing updates as I can. As long as I'm on the air, I'll bring you the latest information that I can. But also have secondary and third or fourth sources available. Don't just rely on me, because I'll be going on and off here as I'm based in Virginia. But I've got all the necessary equipment here that I need to bring you the very latest. So you see there Golden Meadow there near the eye, and now it's moving closer to Lockport and Houma. This area has been sending hurricane reports in to the National Weather Service of winds gusting over just over 100 miles per hour. And unfortunately, storm surge is another big issue here that we are watching. Let me show you here GR Earth. This is the one on my computer. You can see a very well-developed eye here to the southeast of Houma. Morgan City is starting to get on some of the core of the storm. If I take off the radar here and you look at the National Hurricane Center color palette that we've got up for you, you can see New Orleans here just to the north of the center. It's probably going to do something like this. I can actually put the track on for you, and we'll take off some of these other icons here. So we'll go down here. We'll just do the category icons. Okay, so a Cat 2 later on tonight by 7 o'clock. You see it there, Cat 4 right now still. It's going to pretty much take this path, and I've got my telestrator on so we can show you what's going on with that. but it's going to pretty much move west-northwest or north-northwest toward the Baton Rouge area in general. But you also have to remember this is a very large storm. And so what's happening too is that you've got this stronger punch here on the east side. This is where our 150, 160 mile per hour wind gusts are going to be located and are located right now. That's going to continue to funnel all the storm surge in up to 9 to 11 feet of storm surge, and then 10 to 20 foot waves on top of that. That does the majority of damage right along the coast. Water is an incredible force when it piles up like that with a hurricane. But if you take the distance from the core out from the center, because we always concentrate on the center, but that's not necessarily where all the impacts are. You can take the core out about 50 or 60 miles, and you can follow that into New Orleans and into Baton Rouge as well. We've got a tornado warning, by the way, there just around the Gulfport area. Flash flood warnings for Mobile Bay. They're quite a distance away from the center, but as I mentioned, this is a large storm, and these outer bands are going to have tornadoes in them. So if you live in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, that area, you are pretty much under the gun for severe weather, tornadoes, and flash flooding, along with some gusty winds of tropical storm force, even over 100 miles away from the center of the storm. The west side, too, we can't ignore Baton Rouge. It may actually, the center may come very close to Baton Rouge here as we go into the overnight hours of tonight. By then, it's going to be a Category 1 or 2 storm. That is still nothing to mess around with. Inland, of course, you have all these trees that especially with up to 10 to 20 inches of rain, will really uproot very fast. And hurricane force winds of 75 to 90 miles per hour. In some areas here, we are probably going to see some winds continuing to gust well inland, especially around New Orleans. A lot of the models have been showing gusts over 100 miles per hour or up to 100 miles per hour that far inland. So I am very concerned. I want to also add that it's an important situation. Every storm is different. But tell you a little bit of history here. Hurricane Katrina, 16 years ago on this date, made landfall in the general area that we're seeing it now. Hurricane Katrina was weakening as it made landfall. So that means the storm wasn't nearly as strong as Ida is right now. We had 120 mile per hour winds with Katrina, and the wind was dropping off as it moved closer to the coast. I was in Jackson, Mississippi, covering 12-hour shifts there at Channel 12 in Jackson, Mississippi. And I can tell you that by the time it got to Jackson, we had a lot of traffic from evacuees up there, but it tore Jackson up. There was still plenty of wind. It takes a long time for that inertial wind to basically stop moving, and even when it gets up into the Virginias, West Virginia, and the West Virginia, it's not going to fizzle out completely. We'll still have 25 to 30 mile per hour winds. I've got the radar overlaid there. Somebody on TikTok says they're in Grand Isle. It's horrible. The wind is shaking their home heavily. Gotta go, they say. So we'll be praying for you, man. So I know it's a scary situation, and that wind will do incredible stuff when you get into the core of the hurricane. My experience in hurricanes is that every one of them is different, so we can't necessarily say this is going to be just like Katrina. We can't compare it too much to Michael because every storm has a little nuance that makes it a bit different. This one, what's making it different to me is the incredible size that it has and the fact that it's coming in at its strongest. Pretty much got strongest overnight tonight, and right around the core there we're seeing some horrible conditions. So we're going to zoom in a little bit here. I've got some other images that I want to show you, but when I have a lot of monitors on the screen, it means that I'm trying to show you the true power of the storm in every different way that I can. This is off of my home computer that I brought in today. Get my mouse over here. So we're using something called NDI to tap into that. This is an incredible image. This shows basically the visible satellite with kind of a convective shadow put on it. And you can see the lower level clouds there, that thing spinning like a top right there as it approaches the Homa area. So Homa, batten down. This is probably getting really bad right now. We had somebody else in Grand Isle just a second ago saying it was really bad. You can see the spin, and there's also an inherent amount of wind shear because it's so calm in the eye. That outer eye wall is where you see those 150-mile-per-hour winds. That creates a lot of spin in the atmosphere. And so the National Weather Service out of New Orleans and out of southern Louisiana here issuing eyewall warnings, extreme wind warnings in effect as this continues to move in because of the inherent fact that you're going to have damage on the scale of an F4, F5 tornado. By the way, the first time those warnings were issued, I was in the studio of WJTV, and we didn't know what they were because it was an experimental product. That's when they started to use those type warnings. But this satellite gives you an idea of what a hurricane does. It's taking energy, too much energy. Always near the tropics, you have an excess amount of sunlight and heat. The poles, like the North Pole here in the Northern Hemisphere, has a deficit. And so this is all weather does, is it tries to balance out the two. And a hurricane is a heat engine that develops over the water. It picks up the water, and as it condenses out, it releases latent heat. That heat then gets released and goes into the jet stream. We're going to have that in Virginia and West Virginia as it makes that transition. But it's actually doing a job for the atmosphere. It's actually trying to move things around to equal out the temperature all over the globe. It never accomplishes that, but it has to do it in these bouts. So I just try to put it in perspective. It's a horrible storm, and it's a horrible situation. That being said, it's part of what we have to go through to get the weather to balance itself out across the globe. We have seen an increase in the degree of severity in these storms over the past 20 years. We won't get too much into that, but I just wanted to kind of show you here the vastness of the system. And you can see well away, these are winds that have been gusting at the official stations. You can see them there, 97 miles per hour there in New Orleans. We had them over 100 miles per hour on some of the buoys out there, and I'm not getting reports out of some of those same reporting stations anymore because I think they've just been shut down by the incredible winds. But they were well over 100 miles per hour. Just about 10 feet off the surface. Look at all of this activity off to the east here. This is to the south of Mobile Bay, southern Alabama, up to Hattiesburg. These outer bands here, you don't want to take those for granted either. You can see the texture of the clouds, just a lot of energy there. And those areas of dots that you're seeing there, the white dots, those are lightning strikes that I can pick up with my program here as well. And you can see quite a bit of lightning, and that means there's a lot of upward motion in the atmosphere coming out of that area. And so what you're going to see are a lot of heavy rain squalls, and this will probably bring some severe weather into southern Alabama. So watch this right here. That's going to spiral in, and Mobile will continue to see flooding, and I think we're going to continue to see the chance of severe storms and tornadoes in each one of those bands as far east as Panama City, Florida. If you're watching this out in that direction, you can see the winds are gusting up to about 34, 35 miles per hour, which certainly it's not 100 miles per hour, but that's still some pretty significant wind. And you can see them gusting over 50 miles per hour where we've got a little bit less friction over the water. Also notice on the southern edge of the storm, still gusting over 50 to 53 miles per hour, over about 150, 200 miles away from the center. So even after the core moves over whatever area it's going to track over, and again, it looks like it's moving in on Houma right now, Houma to Baton Rouge, Donaldsonville, this area is in the path of the worst part of this hurricane. Those are the lower winds there in yellow, or the lower clouds. You can see that little clear spot there, stadium effect. If we zoom all the way in here, you really get an idea of the severity of this system. And you can see right now over Chauvin, Houma, looks like La Rose and Galliano are on the eastern eye wall of this. There's Grand Isle. Somebody right here on TikTok told me Grand Isle was getting slammed. You are actually seeing the center move farther away from you, but you still got that southern part of the storm, that southern core that's impacting you. But Morgan City here in the Donaldsonville, things are going to be going downhill. I don't think Morgan City will take a direct hit. New Iberia farther away too, but we're going to start to see conditions worsening there as the center starts to cross the area. And I can put on here the forecast models and the official track from the National Hurricane Center. It looks to me like it's moving now a little bit west of most of the model guidance. That's maybe good news for New Orleans, but I don't know if it's all that much of a difference because it's such a large storm anyway. You can see they're gusting now over 60 miles per hour there in the New Orleans area. The big concern will be if the levees hold up. That was the condition with Katrina, and again, every storm is different, so we'll continue to pray for you because you're under sea level, very vulnerable, especially with all that water moving on and the wind whipping the water and kind of pushing it into the areas that just can't hold it in some locations that we've seen in the past. So just continue to shelter in place and don't go into, if you're watching me in this area, they're telling people not to go into your attic if you don't have a way to get up on the roof. They had that in Katrina, and they had a lot of deaths that way. But if you've got a way, if you have to go up to your attic, the water, if it does come up, worst case scenario, if you can get up on your roof, that would be okay. But if you can't, you don't want to get trapped in your attic and have nowhere to go if the water goes up above there. Baton Rouge is going to take it on the nose again. I think later on into the afternoon. It won't take it long, probably a few hours before conditions really start to go downhill there. Notice the tornado warnings continue coming out. We've got a new warning in effect here for southern Mississippi, and that, as soon as it popped up, went away. That's how fast these warnings are going to be popping up because tornadic activity can be very hard to track on radar because they are very small tornadoes. They pop up and then they go away. But it's going to go up through Baton Rouge, so Hattiesburg to Macomb. You're going to see some hurricane force winds in Macomb, I think, later on tonight going into tomorrow morning. And then for Jackson, Jackson, Mississippi, this is probably going into the morning tomorrow, I think. You're looking at the center of this moving just west of town. Meridian will be a little farther away, but there'll probably be some spiral bands, and there'll probably still be some hurricane force winds in and around the Jackson, Mississippi area. You will probably lose power for days, if not weeks. And of course, the farther south you get, if you've already lost power, it's probably going to be out perhaps for months. This is a geography changing storm. It changes the whole landscape down here, unfortunately. So we've seen with Michael, and again, you can see some of the lightning now around the Panama City area. But I'm just following the track inland now. Tupelo, Mississippi, you can see all the models take it just west of you. It'll start to weaken, of course, as it comes into Murfreesboro, Tennessee, but Nashville and just outside of Nashville where they had that flooding in the Waverly area, it'll be much, much weaker, probably just a tropical storm or depression by the time it gets up into Tennessee. But it's going to put down a lot of rain in its path. And then as we move into eastern Kentucky and western Virginia, well, we've got our own severe storms going on right now in parts of Lexington, Virginia, up into the mountains here. But if you look at West Virginia, they've had a lot of rain there lately, and the concern is for up to 3 inches of rain to cause some flooding here. This will be by the time we go into Tuesday night and Wednesday. The concern for the Roanoke Valley area into western North Carolina will be for severe weather on the southern end of these tracks as they continue to bring in bands of rain. And I do think that's going to be an issue. We'll have some embedded storms that will probably rotate well inland across the North Carolina area, the Tennessee area, into West Virginia. So the mountains here, you're not immune from tornadic activity if you have enough wind shear. And the time frame, again, is later on this week. And I would expect some flooding concerns. Some of the model data coming in with the really incredible amounts of rain in a short amount of time for the big cities, Philadelphia, south of Pittsburgh, the D.C. area, north of town, in Allentown there, and then for Boston and New York City, watch for some heavy rain and flooding by the time we go into later parts of next week. But that's a look at it right there on that particular imagery. So I'm going to switch over now to the other monitor and show you my Gibson Ridge Earth. This is just a different view, a different enhancement. There are probably 50 different ways to look at this hurricane, if not more. But this kind of shows you the radar and the different areas that the Storm Prediction Center is watching. You can see those warnings there that are coming out as well. We've got numerous flash flood warnings. Sorry about that. from Atmore down to Pensacola, Florida. Let me stop it here. We'll look at the very latest ones. Mobile also under a flash flood warning. Central Mobile County, southwestern Alabama until 7:45 Central Time, Central Daylight Time, Sunday. So small creeks and streams, highways, underpasses. You don't want to be out driving in this. I've got a friend in Mobile and told her to shelter in place. We'll try to go out and move out of the area now because the roads are starting to flood, and any of these bands at any time can produce a tornado. I don't at the live moment have any tornado warnings out, but if I put this loop back up, you can see how they've been quickly popping out in the red polygons there and then going away. We had a couple of them there around the Mobile Bay area, in fact, well away from the center, and Panama City too has had some storm reports coming in here. I don't want to forget the folks in the panhandle of Florida, 35, 39 mile per hour gust there at Tyndall Air Force Base. That was a little bit around the lunchtime hour. You can see on this particular satellite image just how strong this was. The blue and then even the green on this particular satellite showing some very, very ominous, very high, very cold cloud tops as this moved in. We had winds of over 100 miles per hour reported right near landfall there, Jefferson, Louisiana there. That was near Grand Isle. And again, we'll put that back into motion. You can see how the reports were coming in, and I'll read some of them here. 64 at Galliano, Louisiana. That was as the core was making its way inland just a bit. And again, I say inland with kind of an asterisk because it's very marshy in this area, so it's not like it's running right into mountainous areas. It's kind of sitting over the water still in many ways because there's just so much swampland and it's very marsh latent out there. Baton Rouge, not much rain in the area yet, but we are expecting amounts to really start to go up as this continues to move inland throughout the day today. So let me get back here to some of the computer model images here. Make sure you can see it there on TikTok as well. So this is the HWRF model. And you can see that right now through the afternoon today. We still have winds in here that will be gusting over about 70 to 80 to 95 miles per hour. And so that'll continue to be something we'll watch here as it comes across eastern Louisiana, southeast Louisiana, and then as we go into Mississippi. Still looking at winds that diminish, but still are up there about 30 to 50 miles per hour by the time we cross the river here, come out of Louisiana, and go north into Mississippi. And then we continue to see winds gusting over 30 to 40 miles per hour with embedded storms that may produce some gusts up there over 40 to 45 miles per hour. And I wouldn't be surprised to still see some isolated gusts even stronger than that. This particular model takes it right near Nashville, Tennessee. This is Tuesday at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then from there, the center continues. You see these winds still gusting over 20 miles per hour. Eastern Kentucky, then going into West Virginia. That's where the center will be Wednesday by that time. Now, again, the impacts will be very far away from the center. In fact, we'll still see some very heavy and probably some severe storms to the south of the center, and to the north we'll have more in the way of heavy rain. I do think as this moves in, more of the heavy rain's probably going to be north and west of the center. So I'd watch Ohio, Kentucky, and parts of West Virginia again for the heavy rain threat, but areas to the south of the center and to the east of the center will probably have to watch the severe storm threats. Let me back this back up here. And you can see these supercell storms that in a hurricane variety are kind of moving across the area. And watch out again, Jan, which is Jackson, Mississippi. Watch out this area. I'd also watch Birmingham, Alabama for a chance of something spinning up. Tupelo, Mississippi. You can even see the rotation there on the radar picture there as it continues to spiral on through. This particular model thinks the rain may look like this. In the real world, it could be something different altogether. Here's a look at LaForce Parish, Terrebonne Parish here. Traveling right now in that Eyewall. Power lines, trees down, winds reported at 125 miles per hour. That's 2 miles north-northwest at Golden Meadow. And that was at 1:47, about an hour ago, Central Time. 64 mile per hour winds. I'm kind of reading the reports to see if we've got anything new coming in. Grand Isle, winds over 100 miles per hour, and that's not a surprise. Jefferson, Louisiana, wind speed is 71 miles per hour, gusted up to 95 before it stopped working at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. So a lot of these reporting stations are either losing power or the anemometers are just breaking off because it's still a strong category 4 hurricane. And something to mention about the category here, we talk about the speed dropping from 150 to 145, and that's just 5 miles per hour difference. Well, it's an exponential scale in terms of the impact. So as you go from 140 to 150, the damage that's created in just that 10 mile per hour difference goes way up on the real world scale. So numerically, yeah, it only looks like 5 or 10 miles per hour difference. But unfortunately, the impact from storm surge, wiping off probably buildings off their foundations that aren't well built, just utter destruction near that inner eye wall. And unfortunately, that's coming right across Terrebonne Parish and LaForce Parish here. And Homa's in the outermost eye band. There's a couple eye walls here. This is the newer one. This is the older one here near Chauvin, the stronger one there in the center. And you can see it there. So it's moving right up the boundary between LaForce and Terrebonne Parish there. So Chauvin, LaRose, Jay, Lockport, Raceland, be looking at this within the next 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. It's going to go downhill. St. James Parish, if you live in that area, you definitely want to batten it down. And again, we'll watch the impacts as they continue to come in inland across a good part of the southeast as well. This is another look at everything. You can see it on the 3-dimensional radar picture there. There's New Orleans, and again, starting to get more of the core now of the hurricane there in New Orleans coming out of the Slidell radar. You can see a lot of rain around Covington, Hammond, and of course, it's kind of a double whammy because you've got all that rain falling, the city's below sea level, and you've got the new floodgates and everything up in the different areas. Golden Meadow, though, seeing the hardest part of this storm, and that's nearing Lockport as well. That's the worst part of the hurricane that you can even be in. Of course, within the eye, doesn't look like that's over a populated area. That's the good news, but I'm sure as this continues to move inland, it'll probably be around 130, 140 miles per hour still as it moves inland. And probably near there, you're still going to be gusting to over 100 miles per hour. The models were hinting at New Orleans here, south of New Orleans, the Grand Isle, still getting battered well into the evening. So on the east side of this storm, there's still going to be bands and heavier rainfall moving up from, everything's counterclockwise. It moves in from the south and wraps back around, while the upper level winds start to do this. Start to move in more out of the southwest and push the whole storm. Those are the steering winds. So in between is where you get the tornadic activity and where you can get a real big mess out there. I'm going to take a break for right now, but I'm going to be collecting more information, putting out other posts as we go into the rest of the afternoon and the evening and into tonight, watching everything very carefully, praying for you guys that are watching on TikTok, that are in the path here. And we will be bringing you more updates. I'll be bringing more updates throughout the rest of the evening. Stay safe, everybody.